Welcome to Clause 8, the #1 podcast on intellectual property, trusted by top in-house counsel, judges, and policymakers worldwide. Hosted by Eli Mazur, we bring you in-depth conversations with the personality shaping IP. Brought to you by Tradespace, where ideas take flight.
Welcome to Clause 8. Everybody asks me, how do I choose the guests for the episodes? And obviously, a lot of my guests, I know them from outside the podcast. But today's a very special episode. I actually knew Ceyda since my first firm. We both started the same firm together. And Marcia, thanks to Marcia, Tradespace is a sponsor. So I knew them separately. But the reason I decided to do this episode is because I was talking to Ceyda about becoming Chief IP Counsel at HP, and she actually mentioned that she credits Marcia for providing really good mentorship and advice when she first started there. So as soon as I heard that, I'm like, all right, I gotta have them on to tell that story because you hear a lot about mentorship, you hear about doing it, but I know both of you actually walk the talk. Ceyda has given me a lot of good advice over the years, so I'm excited to share your story and share your wisdom with everyone. So thank you so much for joining Clause 8.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
So Marcia, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your story. I guess I should, it was called Hewlett-Packard back then, but can you tell us how you ended up there? And I guess maybe, how'd you meet Ceyda?
Yeah, absolutely. So how I ended up at HP was simply by taking a phone call. I was sitting in my office at a law firm across the street from HP office and, just doing the grind of the law firm, thinking about my career. At that time, I really wanted to become a partner. And I was realizing more and more that the partners were giving me advice and they were saying, Marcia, becoming a partner is just a pie eating contest where the prize is more pie. So I was sitting in the office and I pick up a phone call and it was a recruiter that said, oh, you're at that point in your career, you really got to consider going in-house. And I didn't know if that was going to be the right move for me, but I decided to follow the recruiter's advice and interview at HP across the street. It was not going to be much work to do that. So I did that, and it turned out that it was a wonderful fit for me because it felt like going home. And what I mean by that is before my legal career, I was a graduate student, right? And doing my graduate work, getting my PhD in electrical engineering and going to support the HP Labs organization felt like, oh, I'm going to be working with researchers again, and it's going to be great. So it turned out to be a wonderful fit for me. So that's how I ended up at HP.
Ceyda, obviously, I mentioned we started at the same firm together. I know you worked at big firms, but then you started your own firm. So what was your path to HP? How did you?
I have worked at an IP boutique along with you as my first law firm experience. Worked at a general practice firm after that in their IP department, still focusing on all aspects of IP. And then I used to live back in New York, then tried my own practice, very specifically focusing on startups and individual solo inventors. That is still a passion of mine. People who know me well, they know that I have a sweet spot for startups and always look to support them in any capacity possible. And I look to continue that long term. But there was a brief period where I tried to help startups raise money, kind of establish their IP practice, which ties into how they raise money, right? So did that. And similar to Marcia, one of those days I got a phone call from a recruiter mentioning a role at HP and that innovative culture and they have the labs group like Marcia mentioned, which is very much kind of like a startup in a way, right? It focuses on all future facing experimental areas where we look to turn into commercialize it in some sort of product world. So all aspects of what I was hearing about the role tied to, with my background and prior experience in law firms really led to a good transition in that sense. And I ended up taking that position with HP back then in New York.
And what was that transition like? You go from being your own boss and kind of having your own vision to joining a company that obviously had a pretty long history, a very established IP department, had its own vision about how it was doing things at the time.
Yeah.
What was that aspect like?
I actually loved it. So as much as I love working with startups, I don't love running a startup myself. That really wasn't, I do love more structured environments where maybe resources are present and I tap into, leverage them into the work I do instead of trying to create it from scratch. So I think that element of it just by nature really resonated well with me. HP is a long-time institution, has very strong practices in place. It's a talent, pool. So from that aspect, having access to mentors, having access to growing in building experience in areas that I didn't get to do by myself, and benefiting from an existing engineering-based innovation pool and doing the work I kind of knew to do from my prior experiences, which was more in the patent space, just was a good fit, to be honest. And it worked out really well. And I did cherish that kind of business aspect of what we do within HP tied to the legal aspect from an IP perspective.
At the time, and you would know better, but I think HP had a somewhat unique model in that the in-house counsel actually did a lot of the patent preparation prosecution work, and as people kind of, I think, got more senior, they got more senior roles, and they got involved in other aspects, including licensing. Marcia, obviously now in your new role, you see a lot of probably you talk to more in-house departments than anybody. I guess going back to that, can you kind of like, what was that like? I guess, what do you think about that model, and what was it like to see new people join and kind of go through that?
Yeah, I mean, it was being at HP, as Ceyda mentioned, was such an amazing opportunity because HP at the time was a very large company, but it really emphasized innovation and being supporting, the HP Labs organization. I got to see what it was like to work on those future-facing innovation, right? Not just the evolutionary innovation, but also attempts to doing revolutionary innovation. And Labs at the time was organized around moonshots. So there were many different moonshots. And what was fascinating is that the moonshots would put together engineers and researchers that worked on different technology areas. So there was a moonshot that was for glasses-free 3D. So, and that had computer vision researchers, but he also had people that worked in optics, people that worked on signal processing and other areas. And I think for me, as a young, still starting my career on an in-house role, my first in-house role, I got to see, the excitement of and the passion of the researchers working on a problem early on and building the portfolio for them, with them, and then later assisting on the transaction that resulted in the spin out of a company for HP. So it was really great model. And it was, something that HP tried to do successfully at times, and other times, as technology changes, things sometimes don't work out. But I think it was wonderful to be, in an organization that truly valued innovation, that had the labs working side by side with the business units, trying to get, research into HP products, but also really pushing innovation in ways that, led to the spin out of a company called Leia 3D.
Well, yeah, that's a very cool experience. I guess, Jada, do you remember? I guess obviously you joined the company, and you have like I think you told me, but I guess part of the story. But you have those day-to-day tasks where you can just kind of get immersed in just the preparation prosecution. I guess, how did you think about like, hey, what should I be doing here? What should I be spending time on long term?
The beginning with HP, at least for my career, the starting point back then was very traditional, right? I joined as a patent counsel, which ultimately meant I did a lot of prep and pros work. Most of the work that I used to do in a law firm, now I was doing it in an in-house setting only for HP, specifically on certain businesses or portfolios, and then eventually grew into a portfolio manager type of role. Which is all wonderful experience, but it gets to a point where you realize, okay, so this has been great and I've done this enough and I have a really good solid understanding sense but it's feeling rather repetitive. So what else can I do? And I guess my story with Marcia, whether Marcia remembers this or not, so everyone has their own kind of version of the story, right? So I remember, and this was after Marcia left HP. I remember calling her and asking her on the phone, Marcia, this whole patent thing is wonderful and I love doing it, but how do I do more of something else with an IP? How do I actually kind of get out of this, call it, felt very siloed environment and tap into other things. And whenever I keep pushing for that, everyone keeps saying, oh, you haven't done that before, or you've done it years ago, or there are other people who are specializing, focusing on that aspect of work. They're busy with that. So you go do your thing, sort of call it pushback, which can at times be very discouraging, right? Or disengaging. So I remember asking Marcia on the phone, how do I break this barrier and actually start doing licensing and negotiations or contracts or any other thing outside of your kind of portfolio management, traditional patent responsibilities? And she had really good answers for me on the phone, and more so because of the way she usually, she's great with her voice, very encouraging. I felt very pumped up and excited and got out of that call thinking, okay, let me go figure this out sort of attitude. And that was kind of the beginning for me. You asked originally the question around having more specialized focus to broadening kind of the responsibility base. That was my push kind of there. And it didn't come easy. I hope it comes easier for other people. We just weren't structured that way, but it worked out.
So what was the advice that Marcia gave you in terms of?
Yeah, I think my approach to that was, I was very much 0 or 100, right? How do I stop doing what I'm doing and then do all these other things as my kind of full-time job? And the realization out of that conversation I had with Marcia was, it really doesn't have to be 0 or 100. It could be, an hour here, 3 hours there. It doesn't even have to be that you do the work. You could be shadowing, or you could be, kind of supporting. So it comes in different manners and capacities, and it comes at different contribution levels, and it comes in different volumes. So you just flexibility around just using opportunities to tap in and, with opportunity to prove yourself, to build that trust. And then next thing you know, one after another, those opportunities will come to you instead of you kind of going after or fighting for them in a way. So that just brought that perspective to me. Instead of thinking I have to leave this role and find another role that will allow me to do all these things, there are ways to do that within this role as well. Just a matter of balancing it and utilizing the existing small, tiny bit opportunities to grow thereon.
So Marcia, obviously you give good advice to Ceyda, but you've been at the other companies. I guess maybe talking to, let's say there's a law firm attorney who's listening to this and says, hey, that's what I kind of want to do. I want to go to in-house counsel and do other things. I guess, how do you figure out if, this is a company that will allow me to do that? Or is that the right question even? Like, Marcia, what advice would you give in terms of that?
Yeah, I think it's really not, my biggest advice is to not be afraid to ask questions to people in your network or outside your network that you value, that you think, you could learn from, right? And being humble to know that you don't know everything and there are a lot of things you don't know. And the legal career in IP is really fascinating and drives me every day, right? Because there's so many aspects to it. It's not just about the legal work, it's about the technology, it's about the business. So recognizing when you don't know something and trying to reach out opportunities that will allow you to bridge that gap, right? And really not being afraid of taking risks. There are times in your career where you have that gut feeling of, waking up every day and doing the same thing over and over and over, right? And I think it was Steve Jobs who said it in his famous speech that he gave at a Stanford commencement. If you wake up too many days, and I may be saying it wrong, but you can all look it up, right? And you have that feeling that, you are not happy, or you're not doing something that has that impact and that, gives you that joy and satisfaction. That's when you do that gut check and say, hey, I need to be searching for something else, and I need to be, really reaching out to people. And that's where mentorship is so important. And I think both Jada and I benefited from wonderful mentors and wonderful leaders at HP and across our careers, right? They really were there at different points in our careers to give us that advice, and sometimes that advice is a conversation that you have in a hallway. I remember one attorney at Cooley that gave me an advice in walking in the hallway, and that stuck with me forever, right? So
What was the advice?
the advice was, don't be afraid, be confident and go for it. You are smart, you can do it. And I've gotten that advice over time, right? And I think for women, it's something that we need, because we are in a much more male represented field, and sometimes we feel alone, and we bring so much to the table, right? But sometimes, when you are in a room and they're all men, and you're kind of like become a little shy, and you don't know how to be as assertive as you can be. And if you are too assertive, it goes the wrong way. So it's always navigating that. And the mentorship that you get and the advice that you can seek out is crucial, right? Sometimes it's great advice, sometimes it's bad advice, but you learn along the way. The more you are further along in your career, you learn how to discern the good versus the bad, and you build up. And we learn from failures, right? I had many failures in the past, and I think every failure taught me something.
So do you remember when you met Jada, did you think, hey, she might be Chief IP Counsel of this place one day, or do you that conversation?
Yeah, I think all of us, right, recognize in each other potential. And I think when you recognize the potential, yes, absolutely, you can say, yeah, this person is going to take over my job one day, right? And here she is, Chief IP Counsel, and I am so proud, and so humbled and honored to have played a very, very, very tiny part in giving that advice to her that made her make that switch, right? From just being, in patent prosecution to seeking out these other IP opportunities that led her to be this amazing leader that she is today, right? So I think we all benefit from learning from each other, even in the encounters where it may not be something that we appreciate at the time, but we fail and we learn. And I think it's really being humble and recognizing that success is not a straight line, right? Success takes many turns, and life is a roller coaster, and we got to be able to really have that gut feeling of what drives you, what makes you want to get up every day. We have plenty of choices in life, right? And we, at the end of the day, we want to go to bed with that feeling that I contributed, and I am happy at what I do, and I'm really excited about doing it again tomorrow.
Jade, obviously you were talking about how you wanted to broaden the things that you were involved in, do that kind of more variety, more interesting. But what other advice would you give about maybe succeeding in a large organization? If you start out a junior role as I guess in-house.
So the unique aspect of working in-house versus in a law firm or a different type of organization is it is that one type of business, right? Meaning it's company as a whole, what it does. And so understanding that is extremely important. And then what I mean by that, it's not just let's understand the product portfolio or how technology works. It's more the nuances around, or the depth around what matters to the company, which ultimately means where is the revenue coming from? How are we making profit? How do we, what are the market shares? How do we exist in this industry? How do we define success as a company existing in this industry? So tapping into those and asking all sorts of different people within the company answers to those questions is very crucial. When I first joined, I always thought, okay, I am the patent attorney. I am responsible for this specific portfolio, which is probably one portion of what HP does back then. And therefore, I'm just that's my thing, right? So I was very much focused on delivering on that, and didn't necessarily right away take the time to look at the bigger picture of company as a whole. And now that I look back, understanding what truly matters to the company and where the money comes from, or where the innovation is happening, what the priorities are, whether that's for that year or longer term. Those are very key aspects as to how you can shape not only your career, but your just immediate decisions, even in the work that you're doing. And the other thing I realize is when you ask that question to different people, you get the same sense as to generally, an answer, but in terms of how they word it or prioritize it may sound different, whether you talk to the marketing team versus the finance team, or whether a specific president of a business group. So everybody has, depending on where they sit, have a different view, perspective. And how amazing is it that you get all those perspectives and get to digest them? And then next thing where you evolve as an in-house attorney and kind of shine is, good for you if you can translate that into your own world. So take all of that, right? Blend it, make sense of it, and then create your own IP attorney, patent attorney, trademark, trade secret, whatever practice you're in within the IP space or all of the above. Translate it to goals, priorities, and action items for yourself. That will serve people well in the in-house space, in my learnings at least.
That's interesting you mentioned, because a lot of times, when you're a patent counsel, you're focused on the engineers, but you mentioned all these other people outside of that, obviously the marketing and the business folks who might have a different perspective. Did you kind of get the sense of what they thought that was important organically, or did you really take some time and like, hey, let me sit down with you and kind of figure out what your priorities are? Like, how do you, maybe did it back then and maybe how do you do it now, I guess.
That information is sometimes available at a high level in certain meetings you may attend. Yeah. Call it the all employee meetings, or, various department meetings that you may get pulled in because of your role or responsibilities. But most of the time, my experience is you really have to go and ask. So I would leverage, and then that comes with relationships. Once you get to know somebody, whether that's in the hallway or some sort of holiday party or, some virtual occasion, it's really impactful to follow up and ask these questions to them from their perspective. And then a bit more you learn from that conversation, leveraging that into the next one will make you more kind of knowledgeable and intelligent in the conversation you're having. And the next thing you know, that escalates grows from there on. So it's these outreaches, I think, were the ones that were meaningful to me in terms of asking questions and leveraging the information. But one thing I learned along the way, by the way, is everybody's busy. They're not going to just give you, half an hour out of their day so that you can come and ask them a zillion questions. You also have to bring something to the conversation. So if I were going and meeting with this person, what can I offer to this person that will make their life easier or bring them some sort of knowledge that they don't have, some sort of insight or takeaway they can have from our conversation. While I give that, I kind of earn the position to be able to say, I'm looking to get these out of you. So it's more of this just human nature, give and take relationships until you build those relationships where the trust is there, the background, kind of the basics of the engagement is there. From there on, maybe it doesn't have to be as kind of give and take sort of strategic. It could be more organic, but you kind of have to get there first with people you may not have interacted with before, and to them you're just a name in the in their Outlook box. So
yeah, no, that's interesting about like finding a way as in-house counsel to provide value, because obviously sometimes the interaction with in-house counsel is like, oh, I just have to do something for them or time. But see, obviously, one thing that I think about is companies go through cycles. One day, the patent portfolio, building a patent portfolio is the most important thing ever for whatever reason. And then, a few years later, people forget what that reason is. And the question is like, why are we spending money on this, depending on the organization? Any thoughts about like ways that, I guess, in-house counsel and, maybe specifically IP counsel can find ways to demonstrate their value in the way or help others in the company? Anything that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, I think it's building up a little bit on what Jada said, right? I think having those conversations in different groups and putting yourself out there goes a long way. So I think I benefited so much from being a fly in the wall or attending the research meetings, going to the brown bag lunches, talking to the engineers, but also trying to understand the company strategy by always going to the all hands meetings, and sometimes those meetings come and then you have deadlines and you're busy, but if you can make it, listening to the recordings and really trying to understand, right, what the company is doing from a broad perspective, right? So I think the more you engage yourself across different organizations in the company outside of your legal role, the more you're going to pick up the insights that is really going to drive you to do a better job, and it's going to make your your clients see that you are a valued partner and that they can trust you with their advice. So when you build that trust over time, it goes a long way, and then you become almost an indispensable part of not just the IP function, but also the overall strategy of really trying to understand where a certain technology area is going, and helping them with competitive intelligence and doing all these other things that are really valuable overall for the business.
Jay, you mentioned how obviously, once you join, I guess, HP or maybe a lot of other companies, you're kind of tied to some technology and you're focused on that technology, but then you start thinking about, well, what is really important to the company? I mean, can you, I guess, share, you have somewhat of a unique perspective in that you are a Chief IP Counsel of a pretty large company. How has your perspective now changed now that you're Chief IP Counsel about what IP means, what patents mean to a company like HP? I guess that might differ from what you had when you first joined.
Yeah. And obviously everybody's different. But when I first started at HP, working very closely with engineers, I always saw patents specifically, that's where I started, as call it a trophy, an award, right? So they came up with this wonderful solution idea, and look at us capturing that and protecting that, and then we get to celebrate that with them, right? It was more of that sort of, I didn't fully appreciate patents as call it a tool. But it has a purpose, right? It's a very purposeful tool. And that purpose is really very much tied to who the company is and what they do and what they're trying to achieve, what their priorities are and all. But I think early on, you maybe don't, at least I didn't go there, that strategic approach. I was more maybe operational, right? It was all about, what is the idea? How does it work? How can I put this in claim language? How do I get this allowed? How do I, make sure that it checks all these boxes, that quality checks of the world that we were looking at? So I knew to do more of the patent work than tying it to a strategy or bigger picture business purpose. And down the road, I think that became more dominant or needed. And that was it was a big learning curve for me. Again, it comes more naturally to some people if you've been in that sort of environment before, or I guess depends. But that shift was big, and I very much appreciate. And that's where it started becoming more fun for me, to be honest. I started kind of what Marcia was saying, waking up to feel more excited to start my day and get going. To being able to not just articulate the IP strategy as to what patents do in general, defensive, affirmative, or monetization. This, like, we all know to speak some of those kind of goals with the assets to maximize value, but tying to those to a business goal or business vision, business priorities, that's a very interesting exercise.
And are you talking about that separate from like the defensive litigation purposes, or is that part of it, the business exercise?
It's all together, actually. Yeah. So sure, there's defensive litigation, but why are you doing defensive litigation? Why does that a priority over something else, or the focus for your practice? That doesn't come from because there's these things to do with a patent sort of that. Sure, that is what's available, but there's a bigger picture justification or reason or focus as to why you're going for that approach, and that comes from the business, or that comes from even the industry as to how the ecosystem is working and all. It's not just what the product looks like and how the technology within the product works and what your claims say as to mapping to the product. Those are all the kind of the practices of, or the end results or consequences of what you put in place as the first starting step, and that is 100% business strategy, then I think
Yeah.
we're just translating that into the IP steps.
And that changes obviously, but I think you're very interesting because obviously, a company could have many different product lines. Sometimes they have friendly relationships with their competitors in some ways. Sometimes they want to destroy each other for whatever reason. So you have to be aware of those things. One thing I think you described, the dynamic, is that sometimes the account portfolio management function is siloed from the other stuff that's going on in the company. And then when companies actually need to leverage their patent portfolio in some way, they're like, wait a minute, we spent all this money, we spent a lot of time, money, resources, and now that we need to actually use the patent portfolio in whatever way we want to now, we don't have we don't have good tools available, as I get to use your words.
And you won't end up in that position if when you're spending the money, you had that kind of goal purpose in mind because you were spending the money for that goal. Then obviously you wouldn't be spending it if it doesn't serve that goal. And when it gets to the point of putting to use, you're ready to go. That's why I think certain things need to be thought well in advance before you even worry about kind of patentability or innovation, whether that's I think sometimes we get the order wrong unless we kind of think about it more purposefully.
So how do you do that? How do you translate, hey, let's think about these things first, and then actually when we build our portfolio, we'll make sure that we keep that in mind, in-house, outside. How do you do that, I guess, in the
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I can give one example that is very active in at least my world, which is SEPs, right? Standard Essential Patents. And so the way we approach that big picture thinking is HP as a company makes certain products, and there's certain technologies that go into those products that lead to certain IP related engagements, whether that's your idea generation, and let's go ahead and patent them and put them in a portfolio to protect the differentiating technologies, or it could be some sort of partnership, whether that's we're working on a joint development on a certain aspect of a device with some other parties, therefore their IP needs that are coming out, resulting from that sort of choice point. And then it could be leveraging technology where you incorporate certain things into the product where that leads to some other kind of negotiations or licensing discussions with various parties. And there are different kind of touch points when it comes to this conversation, but that's where it starts from. It's not about, it's about, again, the company and where it's headed and what it looking to prioritize and develop. And then you start double clicking on that to understand, okay, to be able to make this laptop we're using right now, what happens within every bit of that piece? And then you kind of go from there on. And within that exercise, you also have to understand your supply chain, your kind of financials, product, pricing points and marketing lines as to what type of features are being prioritized as differentiation or features that are just by default present but not necessarily the market share fighters. So you kind of get a good snapshot of where these technologies or solutions sit in the scale. And then again, you tie it to the next steps as to what needs to be done from an IP attorney perspective to address those elements. So if you're, again, going back to the standard essentials, if we're participating in a standard and developing some sort of solution that is being standardized, what does that mean in terms of sitting in a standard development body, being a contributor, patenting that technology, adding, or participating in pools, or if it's being incorporated, implemented in the product, who do we have to be talking to? What does that ecosystem look like? What type of engagements, being run globally and kind of leveraging all the conversations from there on.
I want to take a moment to thank my sponsor, Tradespace. Tradespace is an intuitive, AI-powered IP management platform that spans the lifecycle from idea disclosure to portfolio strategy and commercialization. Tradespace uses enterprise-grade AI to cut administrative workloads by 40%. Marcia, any thoughts? Obviously, what Jada describes, you do all those things and you're like, all right, we now need to build a patent portfolio. But I imagine, especially large companies, they have a lot of things going on, different priorities come up. How does a company make sure that they're actually executing their strategy in the way that they envision when it comes to building the portfolio?
Yeah, I think of it as, the storytelling of IP, right? I mean, there's much more to the story than the technology itself and building those claims, right? There's the business, the competitive landscape, the geopolitical factors, all of these things that play a role in that decision-making process along the way at every step of the way. So, and I think, being in tune with everything that is going on related to that portfolio that you're building and the technology itself, the strategy, the business, and really being able to tell the story to the executive team and to all the stakeholders involved in a way that it's compelling and in a way that shows the value of what you're doing, right? So I think it's critical to be, embedded in all aspects of the business and the technology organization to really do the best job you can as that IP counsel, and asking why every time you are making a decision regarding an asset, right? Why am I filing this? Is this going to add value? Right? After all, a patent gives you exclusionary rights. Is it really going to drive a change in behavior from other people? Is it really going to make a dent? Or is it going to be an asset that is going to sit in your portfolio for defensive purposes and eventually you're going to abandon it, right? And then you have to take the budget into consideration. So all of the, the decisions you make every day on asset by asset basis, replying to office actions, what are the positions you're going to give in or give up, what claim amendments you're going to make. All of that has to be made in the context of the business, the strategy, and everything else that is going on, so that you can, at the end of the day, stand up before the executive team and justify how you're spending your money, justify, why, what you're doing is bringing value to the organization that you're working at.
Jade, as part of your role, I think one of the things that you've taken on, obviously, and it's different in different companies, but I think you oversee the IP litigation for HP. Can you kind of share what has it been like to kind of take over that responsibility? And I guess what perspective has that given you now that kind of on the whole, everything that the IP department does?
Yeah, so not quite that way. We do have a separate litigation department responsible for litigation, and IP litigation technically does sit with them, and we work very closely together. And it's more of a collaboration than anything else. And that brings a lot of interesting perspective to how we do the rest of everything else on the IP side, right? I think people who have drafted claims in the past as prep and pros work will appreciate it's very insightful to have a good sense as to how claims are litigated down the road and what kind of issues, problems you may end up with, whether that's your validity or infringement analysis. It really brings great skill sets to how you kind of put those claims together in the first place, and vice versa. I think to be able to litigate, you having a solid sense as to how those claims were drafted and what happened during the prosecution history of a case, and the back and forth with offices and the arguments that were made and all the aspects of what goes into that process. That is extremely insightful to be able to bring that understanding to how you litigate when you get to litigate. That said, so we work very closely with the litigation team, and we think that allows us to have a bigger picture understanding, or more comprehensive understanding of a life of a patent, and brings more value to what we do from the ideation phase to getting these granted and maintained. More so because that is one of the possibilities, right? When these patents get litigated, you kind of have to build it for success up to that point, so that litigation delivers the way you're looking to what you're looking to accomplish here.
Anything sticks out to you, I guess, from lessons learned in terms of things maybe you should be thinking about when you're obtaining those patents?
I think for those of, I guess, people who work in companies with global portfolios, it is very important to think about patent families as a whole. Though they may look slightly different, or the process may look slightly different depending on what jurisdiction you're in. I think it's very important to make sure there is alignment and consistency, and that you're able to bring that credible story to any type of litigation that involves that family of patents. I think that's sometimes maybe if you're not thinking from that angle, you may be more focused on the immediate patent application or country you're looking at, and just look to solve that immediate problem for that immediate case, instead of having a bigger picture approach to what you're trying to get out of.
Good advice, obviously, for especially foreign prosecution. What you can say in a foreign country can harm you in the U.S. So that's great advice there. Marcia, obviously, after you left HP, you were a head of IP at a company, another company, and then, but I guess, so you've been in a few companies since, but I guess my question is, Ceyda mentioned that HP, I guess, which is kind of common, they have a different litigation team, and they work closely together with the IP team. Sometimes, you have just a patent attorney, sometimes, like we mentioned, the patent attorneys do the work, sometimes send an outside counsel, but companies are constantly thinking about this. Like, what is the best way to structure a team? Any kind of thoughts from your experience about how do you figure that out? How do you figure out like what's going to be the most effective IP team for a company, and how to structure the roles there? Any kind of from your experience?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I think that it really depends on the size of the organization, the goals of the organization, right? What you're trying to accomplish with your IP and so forth. But I think the way I think about this is you need people that are somewhat IP generalists, right? That have had that experience in litigation in the past, that have had that deep prosecution experience, that have had transactional experience, right? Those are the people that you want in your team that can help guide the other attorneys, if your team is large enough to have multiple attorneys, or if you are in a startup, you may be a team of one, like I was, right? For a time with my mentor and leader, helping me out. So it really depends on the size of the organization, your goals, and so forth. But I think you benefit from having a deep bench, right, that can do the work, as Ceyda was saying, right? The people that can do the prep and process. If the organization is such that you are in that model that you need to do it some of it in house, right? And working with outside counsel that are really going to provide you that value. So I think it's just a constant evaluation of the strategy and how IP is going to fit in the strategy. How many people do you need, and making sure that when you build the teams, that people are having that satisfaction at the work-life balance, so you can actually work on that team over time and have the retention goals as well. That nobody's going to leave because they are unhappy, because they are not getting the work satisfaction that they need from the job. So it's really trying to be, if you are the head of the team, be the leader that is really going to have that compassionate management, empathy, to understand where each person on your team is coming from, how they are best going to provide that value, and each person brings something to the table, and how you're going to build that team that it's diverse in thought and diverse in experiences, to really be able to learn from each other and do the best strategy that you can do, right? So I think it depends on the organization, depends on the size, but I think in general, I think you benefit from having people that are IP generalists, that know that, for example, if they are evaluating work by outside counsel on the prosecution side, that they've had that litigation background, that know that every word matters, and how can you think of the claim and think of all the words that go into the patent application, and think about that standing up in court one day, right? So having that perspective in the prosecution side, but also having the perspective of a transactional attorney that can help with those agreements and so forth. And so it's really a multifaceted team. That's how I would see it for a large organization. And for a startup, right, like. I mean, what you're trying to do is you're trying to build your portfolio, and there sometimes you could be a team of one or a team of two, and you just need the people that are go-getters, that are doers, that are going to get the job done.
So Marcia actually has a cool, if you go on the Tradespace website, you have a blog called IP Storytellers, highly recommended, but you feature different IP leaders, and you did one about Ceyda. And I think that one is pretty interesting because it talks about how you figured out the structure of your team. Obviously, you started there. It seems like you had a good experience there. Marcia started there. What made you think that, hey, it's time to do a refresh to change the way we're doing things? I guess, can you share that story?
First of all, it didn't happen over time. And when I was new to this role, my current role, we as a team put this to motion, but it wasn't the first time we tried doing it. So we had tried this before in another some years ago under another leader, and we learned a bunch from that. So just to put that out there, I think Marcia said this at some point in our conversation. Learning from prior experiences, whether that's things that worked out really well or the opposite, is huge. So we were able to bring that in.
And actually, I want to, because that's interesting. When you say they tried and decided not to go in that direction. Is that?
We did. We actually we put the model into place, and it didn't work out in the sense.
And can you tell us, like, obviously, for people who are not familiar, what was the model that I guess you had in mind?
The model was that think of what we used to be is we had patent attorneys who were responsible for traditional prep and pros type of portfolio management responsibilities, and we had transactional attorneys who were more of your agreement work, licensing work. We had a trademark marketing team who's 100% trademark copyrights marketing type of work, and then we had a separate monetization team that was your maybe potential patent sales or more of kind of licensing work. So everybody had their very focused, specialized practice areas. And then what we tried doing was we started with the two, which was patents and transactions, and said, we're going to merge these two, meaning all these attorneys who are sitting in these teams will be responsible not only for patent portfolio work for that specific client, and let's, for the example of HP, call it the laptops. And this attorney or multiple attorneys who manage transactional work for laptops, they're going to be from now on both managing laptops potentially still as the client, but won't differentiate patents versus transaction. Whatever comes on their plate, they're going to take it and they're going to go with it, and that's going to be the service model. And so that had its bumps right along the way. You really have to make sure the team is aligned and the culture is set and the competencies or the skill sets are there to be able to manage that. And then what I mean by that is it's inevitable that a patent attorney or portfolio manager who hasn't done much of licensing work, first time pick up an agreement of some sort with a client, is not going to know exactly what to do at the quality level that was being done by an attorney who had been doing this for years and years, every day, all day. So, which is fine. It's just you have to bring those people up to that, at the very least, a certain quality level, because we don't want the client to be feeling this transition. The goal is to make sure it's smooth and kind of seamless to the client, right? And so there's that element, and the culture element as to these people have to work together to bring both each sides up to speed. That means a lot of collaboration. That means a lot of hard conversations, giving feedback to one another to be able to, teach things to each other or give feedback from post conversations with in projects, clients, outspace internally or externally. So all aspects of the culture that was there. And then the other part is kind of the passion element, which is, did people even want this? Like, was this what the team asked for and wanted, or was kind of, did the team see it as a growth opportunity or align with their kind of career development, or was this coming from up down? I've been told once that the best way to get the best work out of people is if you're able to get the best version of themselves, of those individuals. And get the most impactful work, quality work out of individuals, which is the best version of what they're able to produce, is think of it like a Venn diagram, 3 components overlapping, which is your kind of call it competence, skill sets, experience, background, and all. And then passion, which is their interest alignment, where they see themselves, what gets them excited and happy and engaged. And then the last bit is the organizational need. What does that company need in that these, what will they benefit from? What are their kind of ongoing immediate asks for, as you know, if you think of an in-house setting, our business is our internal client or partner in that sense, right? So we really have to be able to get a sense of their needs. So if you can overlap these things on that sweet area where 3 overlapped in the Venn diagram, that is where we shine. And you kind of have to prep a reorg or a change in organizational structure, responsibilities, in kind of making sure when you do that, those 3 things overlap in a decent way so that you get the best out of that experience. So first time we tried, wasn't quite there for many reasons. And then we spent a little bit of time doing listening tours, providing trainings, having rotations, collaborative projects, stretch assignments, you name it, we did it sort of. And then we got to a better place where we said, okay, this is the time. So this team is ready and we're going to put this to motion. And then you start with 2 groups and then you add another group. And then, so we've been growing or expanding from there on at the pace of organizational needs, people's passion and kind of what they express as their excitement, as well as bringing the skill sets up to speed.
What was more difficult, getting in-house counsel focused on pen portfolio management to take on the transactions responsibility, or getting the transactions attorney to take on the pen portfolio?
I'm going to answer your question a little differently because this is this is true for many people in this profession. We're very competent people in the sense that if you have the growth mindset, you're going to go ahead and learn what you need to learn or step into do what you need to step into do. Like we're all, I think, responsible attorneys in general. Like we take our job seriously. We're very much in this mode of providing the best quality work we're able to provide if and when we are excited and passionate. So I think that culture element is the hardest bit. So it wasn't that convincing licensing attorneys to do patent work or portfolio managers to do licensing work and all. They'll all catch up on skills and experiences. They're all good learners, fast learners. And we're really good with building relationships with our organization and our kind of partners within the company, understanding the business needs. And we're good about kind of making sure we work as a group to have a good grasp of that. What's hard is that culture, the passion. You really have to truly spend time with your people, with your team, with everyone included in this kind of a change to understand who they are, what motivates them, what really is exciting to them, what serves them the best way possible, whether they see it on that moment or not, right? So I think that bit was, in my view, the hardest. Then the rest is more of figuring out a way to get there, leveraging resources.
It's hard, and how did you, I guess, manage to do that?
Yeah. We leaned into the culture element more than anything else. So we did spend as attorneys who love their jobs and their kind of substantive work on a daily basis, where I think we've prioritized to spend a lot of time on trust. So spending time together to make sure that we get to a place where we get to know each other, we get to understand, we get to build empathy, and then we get to trust each other to the point where we're able to disagree and solve a problem that way. I mean, the moment that you can get a team to disagree with each other and have a productive conversation to find an outcome where, everybody's able to commit, that's kind of the culture you want to set. That takes effort and time. So we spend a lot of time working on feedback. So we've done workshops on giving feedback to one another, what that art of feedback looks like, whether you're giving or receiving, and how to put that to most use. So a lot of exercises like that. And then, like I said, allowing people to have, and allowing people to spend time externally, which gives them perspective. Because sometimes you do all these things, but they only get what they know to get out of it. And then once they see something else externally in another organization, in an association, in some sort of other setting, they either bring perspective back to question what we're doing or bring appreciation to say, okay, this is actually really valuable and I know to, take it this way or that way. So I think giving perspective, whether that's appreciation or challenge the status quo, is also very important. So we've spent time making sure people were connected externally as well.
Marcia, obviously, one of the hot topics these days is AI. I'm sure I'm not breaking anything here. Anything, I guess, that you're thinking about in terms of how that's transforming, I guess, the work that in-house departments are doing, and outside counsel and the relationship to outside counsel, I guess. Where it stands now, it'd be interesting to hear, and I guess where you think it's going to be going.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, as you know, I'm deep into it, right? And I believe in the power of AI in really transforming how we do our jobs. And I think, 5 years from now, I think you're not going to find, it's going to be difficult to find an attorney that is not going to leverage AI some way in their day-to-day job, right? I think we need to embrace it. We need to obviously have guardrails in place, right? To make sure that the human in the loop, that we trust the AI outputs, but we verify, and that we understand that this is a technology that is there to liberate ourselves from things that take a lot of time that we may not necessarily enjoy doing, to really accelerate everything that we do, accelerate innovation, accelerate IP development, how we protect IP, how we, get inventors to focus more on the R&D rather than spend a lot of time, having to distill concepts to outside counsel, because now you have AI tools that can really, do an amazing job with that drafting process. And of course, everything will evolve. And the worst that you're going to use AI is today, because tomorrow will be better, right? So I think it's a learning. And I think we should all kind of understand that we are living in a very exciting time to be able to see that shift from one era to the next era, right? The internet era, now we are in the AI era. And I think it's truly exciting to be living in this moment and to think about all the possibilities that this technology can bring, not just in IP, but elsewhere.
So obviously, HP, I think, is pretty publicly leaning into AI as the future. But on a practical level, and I've actually heard an interesting story from an in-house counsel at another company. They have a policy where you're not allowed to send emails without using AI. So whatever email you send, you have to go through AI first. Jade, I'm kind of interested on a practical level, looking forward maybe, I don't know, a year from now, or as Marcia says, 5 years from now. What do you think the impact will be on AI in terms of, I guess, what your team does and what your outside counsel does? I guess what do you think the practical impact will be, and I guess what do you see?
I think certain ownership of certain responsibilities may look different, right? The way I think two things will change. Certain, like I said, responsibilities will be handled purely by AI, and it will get to a point where it's able to deliver at a level that we'll be just happy with. It's not quite there yet, but that's just a matter of time. And then the second element is,
And what comes to mind, I guess? Do you have things that you think will get there?
yeah, no, I mean, in many aspects of what we do, like right now, we do our prior art searches using an AI powered solution, but we still have to, make sure that we kind of, that it makes sense and it resonates and it's giving us the right information and the right analysis. But there will be a point, I think it's just going to give up the answer, and that will be the answer. Right? So we'll be able to touch it less, if at all. So I think searches are huge when it comes to that. Summaries is another one. In all aspects of summarizing documents and whatnot will probably be, if not already there. Translations is another one. I think there's certain practical everyday things that we do that we currently utilize AI to a level, but it's just not quite there yet. Therefore, we still have a decent touch to it. Will probably not require much of our touch at all. And then that will also lead to, I think, a change in how we do things. There's a certain process to a task these days. and whether call that the patent drafting exercise, right? If there's a certain engagement model where we talk to an inventor, there's an interview, you bring that in, you draft the claims first, and then you get this approval, and then you move to the spec. Like there's a certain process in-house attorneys as well as our law firms follow to accomplish that task. So I think that flow will look very different. And which is good, because I think the way it's going to go is truly everyone touching where they add the most impact and value. And that's just, I think that kind of makes it more efficient and more effective, in my view. And everyone has a value statement in that workflow. So it's just a matter of, I think, finding that. The other thing I think it's doing and will continue to do is the expectations is now higher. Like it's evolving expectations, right? When I interact with a process of some sort or manage a task, what I'm expecting out of that as the outcome or the output is now, whether that's the process in terms of how much time and money it's spent on the task, but also the outcome output itself, my expectations are higher. And it's just the way it's going to keep going there on. What used to be acceptable for, a write-up to look one way is going to keep evolving, where good thinking will become more scalable. If anything, it will turn into great thinking, in my view, by these AI tools. But at the same time, I think judgment is going to keep also becoming more of a value statement. And whether AI catches up on that one and is able to make judgment calls is a whole nother conversation. But up until that point, which is, by the way, will happen in my view as well. I'm not sure about the timeline, but it will get there. But up until that point, at least, is judgment sits with us, right, with the professionals in these roles. So that will be our value statement, and we'll keep leaning into that more so.
Yeah, and I guess just reading between the lines, correct me if I'm wrong, I think what you're saying is because attorneys will now be able to leverage and access AI tools, the expectations for maybe, I don't know, within the same budget or whatever it is will be higher because of that.
Yes, and I want to make sure that's still future facing. Like that's why some people think that should be happening today. I don't necessarily believe that, because I think as these tools are advancing, we need to play a role in that as well. It's not just the people who are building these tools and putting them out on the market. There's a responsibility to the users as well. And as the users or the consumers of some of these solutions, assuming it's the ones that we're integrating or buying, we need to do our share, which ultimately means giving room to all participants to train, feedback, or whatever else is needed to navigate the process. And I'll give an example of that. Our law firms do use various solutions to draft patent applications. They say this out loud to us, and we're aware of which tools they use and kind of how they're utilizing them. But so technically, one would say, oh, why are we paying the same amount of money for that patent application if there's now a tool being utilized? And I think it may be a valid argument down the road. It's just not yet. Those tools, as much as they do something, it's sometimes, in my view or my experience, it may even create more work to be able to get something out of the draft that it puts out, or not. You're right. It's just a matter of time for these things to get better. But regardless, we're working with product that's just not quite there yet, and pressuring parties who are trying to make that product to get to a better place and more on the user side or integrator side is not the way. Instead, we should be supporting the system, giving them the room to be able to provide the right input, which is feedback or training or whatever shape and form it looks like, so that we can support all these developers to get to a better place with their output at a faster pace.
I'm sure some of your law firms will leave to hear you say that, or they probably know. But another thing I guess I thought very interesting what you said about how the process itself might look different. Can you speak a little bit more about that? And I guess, where do you think, like, hey, this is somewhere where, I guess, you think outside counsel will still have a role in adding value? Like, how do you think about that, maybe?
Yeah, I think they will if they choose to, which is you can't continue doing what you are doing in the same exact way of today, right? So everybody needs to take a step back and think if certain aspects of what I do, which is, call it as a law firm, having an interview with an inventor and then drafting a claim set as to what I hear from as the invention that I'm hearing about. So if a tool is able to draft the claims, that's half taken care of, at least for now, because somebody still has to fix it. We get it. But what is the value then the type of questions you ask in an interview, or is the value that you create an environment where the inventor feels comfortable enough to articulate the invention the right way, or even tell you certain information that they would have otherwise maybe skipped, or is whatever the touch point is, there is still a value statement. You just have to figure out where you play, put in the, extract the most value. And it can't be what we're doing same as today, because some of those tasks are being shifted. And the other element for outside counsel is, when I was in a law firm, I was curious about what the business was, but I was very focused on the invention I was listening to, right? That was kind of the priority. I didn't spend as much time digging into the general kind of company-wide understanding, because it wasn't billable and it wasn't immediate, at least to my back then understanding, wasn't the immediate task in hand. So I think now there's something to be re-evaluated there. I think it's going to become more important that these law firms who work with organizations, startups, whatever capacity they are, to have a better sense of some of the business dynamics than ever. And that is a huge business, a value add in a conversation. So, and that will become more of the norm and maybe the expectation from the client, because there'll be room and bandwidth for that possibly.
Yeah, no, it's almost full circle how you realize the importance of that in your in-house role. Maybe it's going to be a new kind of expectation for outside counsel. Marcia, I'm curious, we'll, as we're wrapping this up, but you have a somewhat a broader perspective. Obviously, the reason people contact Tradespace is because a lot of times maybe it's because all right, I got to use AI somehow in my process. Where do you see that energy now? Like, what do you see the interest being? What do you see kind of where are we in this journey, I guess, of embracing AI and what we do?
Yeah, I think that our customers and our business prospects are really, really excited about the possibility of AI-enabled drafts of patent applications. That's one thing, Ceyda, you mentioned it's not there yet, but it's unbelievable what already is available, and we're really excited. About the announcement we made earlier, on the acquisition we made on this company, Paragon Patents, started out by Princeton CS students that build this product that starts with a claim-centric approach that really puts the human in the loop. If we still believe that the value of our judgment, right, in drafting those claims, that's where we bring to the table, right? So starting from that, and building out the draft, I think it's really great. Also being able to offer better prior art results, being able to, have AI assisted, prosecution tasks, right? Just the acceleration of the practice. I think that's what everyone is excited about, because doing more for less has been something that legal organizations and IP departments have faced in the past few years, and every year, right? Budgets may be cut, and you have to take a look at how are you going to continue to offer that quality products to your clients when you have to do more and more, when the technology just keeps adding on the business risks and the geopolitical risks and all of these things, right? And you have to do more analysis, more strategy. How are you going to do more with fewer resources, right? And I think that that's what everyone is excited about, the AI acceleration of everything. And I think it's just amazing to be again living in this time where we can see the technology develop, and we can kind of be really excited about what's to come.
As we're wrapping it up, Ceyda, I want to kind of maybe go back to where we started. Imagine you are now a junior in-house attorney gives you a call and says, hey, I'm at this large company. I went from being outside counsel to in-house counsel, but now I'm kind of just stuck in pen portfolio management. But really, I want to become you. I want to be Chief IP Counsel. I want to have this high level perspective and be involved in all these cool things. What advice would you give them in terms of, making sure they're the right place to be able to do that and then succeeding? Like, how would you kind of...
I'll say call Marcia. That's what
Yeah.
You're very kind. No. Sure,
No,
call
no.
me.
Yeah, I'll say that as
I'll
a starting
try.
point, and then I'll do my best to elaborate as to what I would add to that. Is I think there are a few things that I truly believe in this journey. One is that breadth, right? So the experience and broadening breadth and tapping into different types of IP projects, and kind of what I learned to do along the way. It doesn't have to be 0 or 100. So it could be something in between, whether you do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit with this person, a little bit with that person. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be this kind of structured one way of addressing it. But breadth is very, very important, and it brings perspective. And then I'll say relationships, and I mean that internally and externally, and I mean that strategically and mentor-mentee type, sponsor type, all aspects, and have a lot of them. Because any advice you're gonna get, whether that's from me or Marcia or somebody else, it's their perspective, it's their experience, it's the 2 cents they got out of kind of what they've lived through in the last however many years in the organizations that they've been a part of. HP has been my only in-house experience. Who knows if you've been at other places, what kind of perspective you get. So what I'm going to share is kind of tap to my own ability, wisdom in that sense. So tapping into many wisdoms, you get the chance of picking and choosing, like what resonates, wonderful, what doesn't, leave it. It's okay. So nobody gets insulted. It's not about that individual. You're not really making them feel better about themselves by kind of taking their advice or not. It's for you. It's not for them, to be honest. So talk to a lot of people. I think that sort of relationship building is very important. And some people label this as networking. I think that puts a lot of pressure on that buzzword. It does not have to be in like a professional setting, a certain way with certain set of questions and a certain, similar to what I said about breadth. You can do this in many forms, many type engagements in many different places and kind of any environment. So I lean into just building the relationships. I think that really matters. And then lastly, I'll say, be very vocal about what it is that you want. I've seen it happen to myself, but to other people as well. People tend to be able to get to what they're hoping for or what they're aiming for more likely if they're saying it out loud. And I think that does many things. So one is, as an individual, it allows you to believe in it more, maybe, right? The more you say this out loud, the more you see yourself in that position, kind of the more mindset of that you carry with you. But it also allows other people to understand and know. And then ultimately, if and when opportunities pop up, you kind of, your name pops up in their head to say, oh, she and he or said this and wanted that, or was hoping to grow into this role. This could be a good step for them. So all of a sudden you have all these people around you who have a snapshot of your goals or your vision to help you basically without even doing too much effort or too much extra touch points. So you're creating a whole network of people, a village who will support you through that journey by just being vocal. Not in a, maybe, everyone does that differently. The more authentic you do it, obviously, the more I think credibility and kind of empathy or support you get from individuals. I'm also a huge believer in that, but putting it out there is big, I think. And some of us are not very comfortable with that, but the more you say it, the more comfortable you get with it because you've said it out loud enough that it becomes more natural. But I would highly recommend anybody out there, if you have a sense as to where you want to be, what you want to try, what you want to grow into, just say it out loud. And that kind of makes it more possible in my view.
Yeah, lots of great advice there. What stuck out to me is obviously, a reason some people want to go in-house is they're like, all right, I just want to be just focused on one place, don't do the networking stuff. But, if I guess the good advice about like if you want to succeed in the way you've succeeded, it's important to build those external relationships, in like learning about, I guess, how to do that. Marcia, I guess, we heard about the advice that you gave to Jada. Some time has passed since then. Anything that I guess maybe anything you've learned since then, or anything else that I guess you would share to somebody that was in her shoes, and about how to succeed in-house?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I can go back to the beginning because Jada talked about the importance of mentorship. So I'm going to say three things that I've learned from mentors. Two at HP. The first one was this amazing leader, and he always liked to say that the only constant in life is change. So I think learning to embrace change, and sometimes we resist it. And I see that, now with AI, people resisting change to the new AI era. But I think early on in your career, realizing that things will change. Sometimes you don't want that change, but just believe me that that change will benefit you in many different ways. The second thing is, holding yourself to a standard that you believe in, that you can go to bed at night, feeling good about yourself and about you having that job satisfaction, and that excitement to do it the next day, right? And it comes to me from another lesson from a mentor who said, excellence everywhere, every day, to everyone. So having that mindset of excellence, I think attorneys, we are already by nature, high achieving people, and we think about the quality of our work product at every step of the way. But thinking of excellence, not just in the product itself, but in how you, view all in your interactions, and how you can learn from others, and how you can always drive towards a better state of anything that you're doing. And the third one is, disappointment equals expectations minus reality, right? So adjusting your expectations, like we all start with think, oh, I'm going to be promoted in a year, in 2 years. Oh, I'm going to become Chief IP Counsel, at this job, and so forth. And then, you encounter those roadblocks sometimes, maybe your own failures, or maybe, other external factors, or maybe the time is just not there. But adjust your expectations, and think about the reality, and always, push yourself, right? Push yourself towards excellence. Believe that change, as unwelcome as it can be, is going to bring opportunities. Every challenge is an opportunity. And I think, just, enjoying the ride. And Jada touched on trust and relationships. I can't emphasize that, enough. Also, the importance of that, is absolutely imperative that you develop those relationships in your trust network, over time, and your network is just going to keep growing and growing. And it's so rewarding to be at this stage in my career where I see people that, maybe I helped in one conversation, or maybe, something that they learned from me, or something that I benefited, and vice versa, right? Learning from people every single day. And I think it's just a joy. So, yeah.
Yeah, lots of great advice there. The one I love what you said about expectations, because I feel like sometimes people get fixated on a goal, and then they forget why they forget why that goal is important, and it's good to reconsider and adjust.
Absolutely.
Marcia, Jada, thank you so much for coming on Clause 8. I'm glad we finally got to have this conversation. I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from it. So thanks again.
Thank you.